June 24, 1944, Kure Naval Arsenal, Japan. Commander Hiroshi Nakamura stared at the twisted metal fragments laid out on the examination table, fragments that once constituted a shell designed to penetrate American warship armor. Outside, the humid summer air carried the distant sounds of factory work as Japan desperately attempted to replace its dwindling naval forces. "Our shells should have cut through their armor like a knife through rice paper," he muttered, adjusting his spectacles. "Yet reports from our fleet show minimal damage to American vessels even after direct hits." Little did Nakamura know that what he would discover in the coming weeks would shatter not only his professional confidence, but the entire foundation of Japanese naval strategy and industrial capability. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the untold story of how a critical technological investigation revealed the overwhelming industrial gap between two naval powers, and how the discovery of superior American metallurgical techniques forced Japanese engineers to confront a devastating reality. No amount of tactical brilliance could overcome the fundamental disparity in industrial capacity and scientific advancement that would ultimately determine the outcome of the Pacific War. The origins of this technological drama stretched back decades before the first shots were fired. In the 1920s and 30s, Japan had embarked on an ambitious naval building program, determined to create a fleet that could challenge any potential adversary in the Pacific. The Imperial Japanese Navy invested heavily in sleek, fast warships armed with powerful guns and torpedoes. Japanese naval doctrine emphasized quality over quantity, believing that superior training, fighting spirit, and advanced weaponry would overcome numerical disadvantages. Lieutenant Commander Toshio Matsuda, head of ballistic testing at Kure Naval Arsenal, had spent 15 years developing Japan's naval shells. A graduate of Tokyo Imperial University with a degree in metallurgical engineering, Matsuda took immense pride in his contribution to Japan's naval power. The Type 91 armor-piercing shell represents the pinnacle of Japanese engineering. Matsuda explained to a group of naval cadets in early 1942, "Our testing confirms these shells can penetrate any known armor plate at operational battle ranges." Matsuda truly believed this. The Japanese Navy had invested enormous resources in creating shells with hardened steel tips and sophisticated fusing mechanisms. In controlled tests against Japanese-made armor plate, they performed admirably. What Matsuda and his colleagues did not yet understand was that laboratory conditions failed to replicate the reality of naval combat, and more importantly, that American metallurgical science had advanced far beyond what Japanese intelligence had estimated. Captain William Morrison of the United States Navy had spent most of his naval career overseeing armor production at American steel plants. A former engineering professor at Annapolis, Morrison possessed an intimate knowledge of the complex processes required to produce the specialized armor plate used in American battleships. "Armor is not simply steel," Morrison explained during a 1941 briefing at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington. "It represents a sophisticated balance of hardness and ductility, requiring precise composition and heat treatment. The face-hardened armor we're installing on our new vessels represents nearly 20 years of continuous research and development." American naval armor production had indeed undergone remarkable advancements. Using massive electric furnaces at plants like Bethlehem Steel, U.S. manufacturers could precisely control the chemical composition of their armor steel, incorporating elements like nickel, chromium, and molybdenum in exact proportions. This was followed by sophisticated heat treatment processes that created a graduated hardness profile through the thickness of the plate. The manufacturing capacity was equally impressive. American shipyards were receiving thousands of tons of specialized armor plate monthly, while Japanese steel mills struggled to produce several hundred tons of comparable quality. This disparity remained largely theoretical until 1943, when the opposing forces began meeting in major surface actions. Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka survived the devastating American victory at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, where Japanese forces suffered catastrophic losses. Serving aboard the heavy cruiser Takao, Tanaka witnessed firsthand the ineffectiveness of Japanese naval gunfire against American vessels. "We confirmed multiple direct hits on an American cruiser at medium range," Tanaka later reported to Commander Nakamura. "Our spotters clearly saw our shells strike their target, yet the American vessel showed no sign of significant damage and maintained both speed and firepower." Similar reports flooded in from other engagements. Japanese shells that should have penetrated American armor were instead shattering on impact, inflicting only superficial damage. This phenomenon became so common that American sailors developed a certain contemptuous confidence when facing Japanese naval gunfire. Ensign Robert Williams served aboard the USS South Dakota during several Pacific engagements. "We took a direct hit from what must have been an 8-inch shell," he wrote in a letter home. "There was a tremendous bang, and the ship shuddered. But when we inspected the damage, we found only a deep dent in our side armor and fragments of the Japanese shell scattered around the impact point. Our damage control officer just laughed and said, 'Guess they don't make them like we do.'" This stark reality finally prompted the Japanese Naval Command to launch a comprehensive investigation. If Japanese shells were failing to perform as designed, the entire naval strategy required reassessment. Commander Nakamura was selected to lead this critical inquiry. A methodical, detail-oriented officer with extensive technical knowledge, Nakamura approached the problem systematically. His first task was to gather physical evidence, a challenge given that most naval engagements occurred far from Japan's home waters. "We need actual examples of American armor plate," Nakamura informed his superiors. "Without physical samples, we can only speculate about their composition and properties." Opportunity arrived in an unexpected form. In early August 1944, a damaged American destroyer ran aground on a small island in the South Pacific after a nighttime engagement. Japanese forces managed to reach the vessel before American recovery teams arrived. Though they couldn't salvage the entire ship, they extracted several sections of armor plate and transported them to Japan for analysis. When the samples arrived at Kure Naval Arsenal, Commander Nakamura assembled his research team, including Lieutenant Commander Matsuda, to begin their examination. "The first thing we noticed was the weight," recalled Matsuda in his post-war testimony. "The American armor was significantly heavier than comparable Japanese plate, suggesting a different composition or manufacturing method." The Japanese engineers began with a basic analysis, measuring the dimensions and calculating the density of the American armor samples. They found that for the same thickness, American plate was approximately 7% denser than Japanese armor. "This suggests a more efficient use of alloying elements," Nakamura noted in his research journal. "Their metallurgical processes must differ significantly from ours." Next came chemical analysis, breaking down the precise composition of the American steel. The results surprised the Japanese team. The American armor contained significantly higher percentages of nickel and molybdenum than Japanese equivalents, along with more precise control of carbon content. "These alloying elements are expensive," Matsuda observed. "The Americans are using materials we reserve for our most critical applications as standard components in their armor production." But the most revealing tests were yet to come. The Japanese engineers prepared cross-sections of the American armor plate for metallographic examination, a process that would reveal the microstructure of the steel and the details of its heat treatment. Under the microscope, the superiority of American metallurgical techniques became undeniably clear. The American armor featured a precisely controlled gradient of hardness from the face to the back of the plate, with a microstructure that indicated sophisticated heat treatment beyond current Japanese capabilities. "The face hardness exceeds anything we can currently produce," Nakamura wrote in his report, "while the interior structure maintains remarkable toughness. This combination of properties requires manufacturing controls we cannot presently match." To quantify this difference, the team conducted hardness tests across the thickness of the plate. The results showed that the face of the American armor, the surface designed to shatter incoming projectiles, was approximately 20% harder than the best Japanese plate, while the back remained ductile enough to prevent cracking upon impact. "This explains why our shells are fragmenting rather than penetrating," Matsuda concluded. "They are striking a surface harder than their own bodies." The investigation continued with ballistic tests, firing Japanese armor-piercing shells at captured American plate under controlled conditions. High-speed photography confirmed what naval engagements had already demonstrated. Japanese shells were literally shattering on impact, their fragments cascading harmlessly across the surface of the American armor. Commander Nakamura's final report laid bare the technical realities that Japanese naval authorities had been reluctant to acknowledge. The metallurgical and manufacturing capabilities of the United States exceed our own by a significant margin. Their ability to mass-produce armor plate of superior quality represents an industrial advantage we cannot hope to overcome in the short term. The implications extended far beyond naval gunfire effectiveness. The superior American armor represented just one facet of a broader industrial disparity. While Japan struggled to produce several hundred tons of specialized steel monthly, American factories were outputting thousands of tons. This wasn't simply a matter of resources, though American access to raw materials certainly played a role, but rather reflected fundamental differences in industrial capacity, technical expertise, and manufacturing sophistication. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, commander of powerful surface units in the Imperial Japanese Navy, received a briefing on these findings in September 1944. A veteran of numerous naval engagements, Kurita had personally witnessed the disappointing performance of Japanese gunfire against American vessels. "So, you are telling me," Kurita asked Nakamura after reviewing the report, "that even if our gunners score direct hits on American vessels, we cannot expect to inflict serious damage?" "That is correct, Admiral," Nakamura replied. "Unless we achieve hits on unarmored sections or score multiple impacts on the same location, our current shells will likely fail to penetrate their primary armor belts." Kurita's expression remained stoic, but the implications were clear. Japanese naval strategy had been built around the concept of the decisive battle, a climactic encounter where superior Japanese fighting spirit and training would overcome numerical disadvantages. But if Japanese weapons could not effectively damage American ships, no amount of tactical brilliance could secure victory. The findings also illuminated another harsh reality. The technological gap was widening, not narrowing. While Japan's industrial base strained under the pressure of wartime demands and increasingly effective American submarine attacks on shipping, the United States was continuously improving both the quality and quantity of its naval construction. Statistical comparison made this disparity painfully clear. In 1944 alone, American shipyards were producing escort carriers at a rate of one every week. Japan could barely complete one carrier every 3 months. American factories were casting more gun barrels in a month than Japan could produce in a year. And as Nakamura's investigation revealed, even the materials themselves, the very steel from which ships were constructed, demonstrated America's overwhelming industrial advantage. For Nakamura and his team, the investigation prompted profound professional and personal reflections. Lieutenant Commander Matsuda, whose career had been devoted to developing Japan's naval shells, was particularly affected. "I believed we were creating weapons equal to any in the world," he confided to Nakamura after completing their research. "Now I understand we have been measuring ourselves against an incomplete standard. Our testing protocols were inadequate because they failed to account for advancements we did not know existed." This revelation extended beyond the technical sphere. For many Japanese officers, including Nakamura, the myth of Japanese technical parity with Western powers had been an article of faith, part of the national narrative of modernization and achievement since the Meiji Restoration. The empirical evidence of American industrial superiority forced a painful reassessment of this belief. "We have been deceiving ourselves," Nakamura wrote in his private journal. "We began this conflict believing in our qualitative superiority, only to discover that our opponents exceed us in both quality and quantity. This is not a gap that fighting spirit alone can bridge." American naval officers, meanwhile, were developing an increasingly accurate assessment of Japanese capabilities. Commander Thomas Henderson served as a technical intelligence officer, analyzing captured Japanese equipment. "Their engineering shows remarkable ingenuity, given their resource constraints," Henderson noted in a 1944 report. "But there's a fundamental difference in approach. We solve problems with material abundance and standardized mass production. They attempt to compensate for material shortages with complex designs and intricate workmanship. In a protracted conflict, our approach provides overwhelming advantage. Henderson's analysis touched on a key distinction. Japanese engineers like Matsuda had created sophisticated designs optimized to maximize performance from limited materials. American engineers, by contrast, developed robust designs that could be mass-produced with consistent quality by relatively unskilled labor using abundant resources. This difference was exemplified in the two nations' flagship battleships. The Japanese Yamato, with her massive 18-inch guns, represented the pinnacle of naval engineering, a unique vessel constructed with painstaking craftsmanship. The American Iowa class, while technically less ambitious, could be produced in series, with 4 such battleships completed during the war and more under construction. The numbers told the story. While Japan commissioned 7 aircraft carriers during the entire war, American shipyards produced 24 Essex-class fleet carriers alone, along with dozens of smaller carriers. As Nakamura's team continued their investigation, they expanded their focus to include captured American shells as well. This examination revealed another dimension of American industrial superiority: consistency of manufacturing. The tolerance variations in American shells are minimal, noted Lieutenant Hiroshi Yamamoto, one of Nakamura's assistants. Each shell is virtually identical to the specifications. Our production shows greater variation, particularly in the hardening process. This consistency resulted from American mass production techniques using sophisticated jigs, fixtures, and quality control processes. Japanese shells, though well designed, suffered from the variability inherent in more traditional manufacturing methods. The result was inconsistent performance. Some Japanese shells performed as designed, but many failed due to manufacturing variations. Commander Nakamura's report made its way through the Japanese naval hierarchy during the autumn of 1944, eventually reaching the desk of Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet. Toyoda, facing the increasing pressure of American advances across the Pacific, requested specific recommendations to address the armor penetration problem. Can we modify our existing shells to improve their performance against American armor? Toyoda asked during a meeting with naval technical staff. Nakamura's response was not encouraging. Modest improvements are possible through better quality control and minor composition adjustments. However, to match American armor penetration capabilities would require fundamental changes to our industrial base, new steel formulations, different heat treatment facilities, and manufacturing controls we currently cannot implement. In practical terms, the Japanese Navy faced an impossible dilemma. Developing shells capable of penetrating American armor would require industrial capabilities that Japan did not possess. Acquiring those capabilities would take years of development that the war situation did not permit. The technical gap once recognized could not be closed in the time available. This realization coincided with broader strategic shifts. As surface encounters became less frequent and American air power increasingly dominated the Pacific theater, Japanese naval strategy placed greater emphasis on aircraft, submarines, and special attack units rather than traditional gun battles between capital ships. For Commander Nakamura and his team, the armor investigation continued with a sense of academic detachment, increasingly disconnected from strategic relevance. They were mapping a technological gap that could no longer significantly influence the war's outcome. We are conducting what amounts to post-war research during the conflict itself, Nakamura observed to Matsuda as they examined microstructure photographs of American armor plate in early 1945. This knowledge might have been valuable 2 years ago. Now it merely documents the reasons for our defeat. Matsuda nodded slowly. Perhaps that itself has value. Future generations should understand that the outcome was determined not by lack of courage or tactical skill, but by industrial realities beyond the control of our fighting men. As the war situation deteriorated for Japan in 1945, Nakamura received orders to compile his research into a comprehensive technical archive. His team worked to document every aspect of their findings, creating detailed drawings, photographs, and analysis of American naval armor and Japanese shell performance. "This is no longer about winning the current conflict," Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai told Nakamura during a brief meeting in March 1945. "It is about preserving technical knowledge for the future of our nation." The Admiral's directive reflected a growing recognition among senior Japanese leaders that defeat was inevitable. The preservation of technical knowledge represented a form of planning for post-war reconstruction, an acknowledgement that Japan would need to rebuild its industrial and scientific capabilities after the conflict ended. Lieutenant Robert Patterson served as an intelligence officer with the U.S. Naval Technical Mission to Japan immediately following the war's end. Among the materials his team discovered were Commander Nakamura's armor penetration studies. "The Japanese analysis was remarkably thorough and scientifically sound," Patterson later wrote. "Their conclusions about American metallurgical superiority were accurate. What's most impressive is that they conducted this research under wartime conditions with limited resources and equipment." Patterson arranged for Nakamura's research to be translated and forwarded to technical experts in the United States. The Japanese findings, ironically, provided American naval engineers with valuable confirmation of their armor's effectiveness and highlighted aspects of their manufacturing techniques that had proven most successful. In October 1945, with American occupation forces controlling Japan, Commander Nakamura received an unexpected visitor at his modest Tokyo apartment. Robert Patterson, now a lieutenant commander, had sought out the Japanese engineer to discuss his research. "Your analysis of our armor manufacturing techniques was remarkably accurate despite your limited samples," Patterson told him. "I'm curious how you were able to deduce so much from such restricted evidence." Nakamura, thin from the food shortages that affected all Japanese citizens in the immediate post-war period, managed a small smile. "Engineering principles are universal, Commander Patterson. Once we understood what we were seeing, the implications were clear. Your nation's industrial capacity allowed you to implement metallurgical techniques that we understood theoretically but could not apply at scale." The two officers, recent enemies now engaged in professional conversation, spent several hours discussing the technical aspects of naval armor and projectile design. Their interaction represented the beginning of a different relationship between American and Japanese technical communities, one based on shared knowledge rather than conflict. For Nakamura, the meeting provided a measure of professional validation. His research, though unable to alter the war's outcome, had been sound. The technological gap he identified had been real, not a failure of Japanese engineering talent, but rather a reflection of broader industrial and economic disparities. "In a sense, our investigation predicted the inevitable outcome," Nakamura later explained to American naval historians. "No nation can win a modern war when its industrial capacity is so thoroughly outmatched." The armor penetration problem was merely one visible manifestation of this larger truth. The armor investigation ultimately transcended its immediate military significance, becoming a case study in how industrial capacity shapes military outcomes. In the years following the war, both Japanese and American analysts cited the example of naval armor as illustrating a fundamental principle. Modern warfare is decided not just on the battlefield, but in the factory, laboratory, and steel mill. Lieutenant Commander Matsuda, who survived the war and later worked in Japan's recovering steel industry, perhaps best summarized the lesson. "We believed that spirit could overcome material superiority. Our examination of American armor taught us that no amount of tactical brilliance or fighting spirit can compensate for fundamental industrial disadvantage. This was the most important technical lesson of the war, though perhaps the most painful to accept." The legacy of Nakamura's investigation extended well into Japan's post-war industrial development. The lessons learned from examining American metallurgical techniques contributed to the remarkable recovery of Japanese heavy industry in the 1950s and 60s. Japanese steel manufacturers, including several engineers who had worked on Nakamura's team, studied American production methods and eventually developed comparable or superior techniques. By the 1970s, Japan had become one of the world's leading steel producers, with quality standards that equaled or exceeded American manufacturing. The metallurgical gap that Nakamura documented had not only been closed, but reversed in some areas, with Japanese steel being exported to the United States. This transformation reflected a broader pattern in Japan's post-war development. The technical knowledge and analytical capabilities demonstrated by engineers like Nakamura and Matsuda during the war found expression in peaceful industrial applications, contributing to what became known as the Japanese economic miracle. For the officers and engineers who participated in the armor investigation, this industrial renaissance provided a form of redemption. The same analytical skills that had documented Japan's wartime technical disadvantage now contributed to its peaceful economic resurgence. Commander Nakamura, who lived until 1982, spent his later career teaching engineering at Tokyo University. He occasionally referenced his wartime research when discussing industrial development with his students. The lesson is not that Japanese engineering was inferior, he would tell them. Rather, it is that engineering achievements require appropriate industrial foundations. What was impossible for us during the war became achievable in peace when we could develop our industrial base properly. In the United States, the lessons of wartime industrial mobilization shaped strategic thinking throughout the Cold War. The ability to mass-produce sophisticated weapons systems with consistent quality remained a cornerstone of American military planning, a capacity demonstrated dramatically during the naval armor experience of World War II. Commander William Morrison, the American naval officer who had overseen armor production, later served on planning committees for industrial mobilization during the early Cold War era. He frequently cited the example of naval armor production as illustrating the critical relationship between industrial capacity and military power. The quality of American armor plate during World War II represented not just metallurgical expertise, Morrison explained in a 1954 lecture at the Naval War College, but our entire industrial system. It showed how research, raw materials, manufacturing capacity, quality control, and technical education all integrate to create military capability. This remains true regardless of the specific technology involved. For historians studying the Pacific War, Commander Nakamura's armor investigation provides a window into the technical factors that shape the conflict's outcome. Beyond the dramatic narratives of battles and campaigns lies this quieter story of engineers and metallurgists whose work revealed fundamental truths about modern warfare. In 1968, Robert Patterson, by then a retired captain, visited Japan and reunited with Nakamura. The two men, now colleagues rather than adversaries, toured a modern Japanese steel plant together. The facility, equipped with electric furnaces and sophisticated testing equipment, was producing high-quality steel for peaceful applications worldwide. "Is this not remarkable?" Nakamura commented as they watched molten steel being poured into ingot molds. "The same knowledge that once documented our nation's weakness now creates its strength." Patterson nodded. "The technology itself is neutral. It's how nations choose to apply it that makes all the difference." This observation perhaps captures the ultimate significance of the armor penetration story. Beyond its specific technical details lies a broader truth about human ingenuity, industrial capability, and the choices societies make about how to direct their creative energies. The American armor that defeated Japanese shells represented one application of metallurgical science in service of war. The post-war Japanese steel industry that helped rebuild the nation represented another application of similar knowledge for peaceful development. The engineers involved, Nakamura, Matsuda, Morrison, Patterson, were not simply technical specialists, but participants in this larger human drama of destruction and creation. In that sense, the story of Japanese engineers examining American ship armor transcends its historical moment. It speaks to enduring questions about technology, industry, and human progress that remain relevant long after the guns of World War II fell silent. The metallurgical investigation that once documented the reasons for defeat ultimately contributed to the foundation of renewal, a transformation that none of the participants could have fully envisioned when they first examined those fragments of shattered shells and dented armor plate. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.